Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Backlog Bunker. First, thing that I want to get out of the way really quickly is I played Persona 5 Strikers, and it's like a Musou game, except it took all the parts from Persona 5 that I think are shit and bad. Now, mechanically, I actually think Persona 5 Strikers is one of the better Musous, because as a fan of Hyrule Warriors, the first one, not the bad one, or the other bad one, that game can be very shallow when it comes to moment-to-moment gameplay. The appeal is in doing everything over the course of one level. So when P5S does things like take the one more mechanic and translate it into a generic live combat setting like a Musou game, it can make the moment-to-moment combat feel way more engaging than it otherwise would. Because I've also played a little bit of Dynasty Warriors, and it was about as engaging as Hyrule Warriors was. The problem is that, while it was a good thing that they translated some of Persona 5's mechanics into the combat, it was a really bad thing that they translated Persona 5's mechanics into the entire game. This mostly comes across in two ways. The first is kinda minor, but it's the thing in Persona 5 where every now and then you'll stop to have the party, talk about God knows what in the dungeon. Maybe you have to do a little bit of an environmental puzzle, something like that. Far more tolerable in a turn-based RPG, because in between every encounter there's going to be a little bit of downtime anyway. I don't think that what Persona 5 fills that downtime with is very good, but it is downtime, so whether it's just walking, or it's doing an environmental puzzle, or it's the party talking, it's fine, it's whatever. In a Musou game, it's far less acceptable, because a Musou game is not a turn-based RPG. There is no downtime between encounters. There are no encounters. All of the enemies are present on the map at the same time. That's the appeal. But because Strikers tries to translate Persona 5's pacing into the game, you get a lot of stop and start with battles that last maybe 15 seconds until you get to your next one, and then maybe the party starts talking, and maybe you get to your next battle, which only lasts 15 seconds, and they start talking, and you do an environmental puzzle, and they start talking again, then you do another 15-second encounter, and so on and so forth, until it gets maddening. And remember, that was the minor problem. The major problem is that another thing it takes from Persona 5 is the whole resource mechanic, where when you're inside a dungeon, you're constantly losing your resources, and then you only get them back when you leave the dungeon. The problem is that Persona 5 Strikers, unlike Persona 5, does not carry over the time system. The whole reason the mechanic exists in Persona 5 is because when you leave a dungeon, that is it for the day. You have to come back on a different day. That is why you will want to overextend in a dungeon and go as far as you can with the resources you have. Strikers does not have this restriction. When you leave a dungeon, nothing happens. You can leave and then go right back in. But your resources are still treated the same way they are in Persona 5, so SP is a very valuable resource. This now means that alongside all the stop and start I was talking about before, you now have additional stopping and starting because you constantly have to leave the dungeon to get all your shit back. So for the most part, this game just ends up becoming Persona 5, but what if it had worse gameplay and worse pacing, and then doesn't even come with the best gameplay part of Persona, which is the social links. Luckily, I was just borrowing this from a friend, so I can drop this game with no hesitation. It sucks. Next that I want to talk about is Fire Emblem Fates Revelation, because I'm playing that now, and its balancing is awful. Honestly, its whole design is awful. It feels like it was made in like 3 days on a couple of sticky notes, and they were like, alright, let's ship it. The map quality can vary pretty wildly, but one of the worst examples is a map that is entirely covered in snow that you have to use one of your characters to attack to get rid of. Firstly, this means that the entire map moves at a snail's pace because you constantly have to use one of your units to get rid of the snow, and then push your army up, and then on the next turn, get rid of some of the snow, then push your army up, and then on the next turn, get rid of some of the snow, and push your army up, and so on and so forth. And then secondly, it means that whoever's your weakest unit in that map is just gonna not get any XP, because the entire time you have to use whoever is your least valuable unit on clearing the snow, just in case there are some enemies behind the snow that you have to have all of your stronger units fight. And then beyond the map design, the game is also just balanced really horribly, because a lot of the units that you get are completely redundant or completely useless. My two favorite examples are, in the chapter that you get a level 9 fighter and a level 9 knight, you also get a level 10 fighter and a level 15 knight, which not only means they're inherently stronger, but it also means that you're going to be able to promote them without having to babysit them first. In another very odd example, in the same chapter that you get a promoted unit with the accompanying stats, you also get a unpromoted unit that isn't even high enough level to promote, and at the same time is not even useful in the map that you get her. She is a very weak, unpromoted mage unit in the middle of a map that is very mean to mages. Once you recruit her, you basically just leave her behind, because otherwise she's not going to be helpful at all, and is only running the risk of letting someone attack her and getting her killed. So far, Revelation isn't very great. But speaking of something that has to do with Revelations, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is driving me fucking insane. When I play an action game, is it so much to ask that I spend the majority of my time in the combat? A big problem that I had with the original Final Fantasy VII was that minigames took up way too much of the runtime, and then Rebirth decides to quadruple down on this mindset by adding even more minigames and making them even longer. There are very long stretches of this game that don't feature combat at all, such as everything from Lower Junon to the escape from Upper Junon, or the entirety of Costa del Sol leading up to the boss fight. When I complained about 7 Remakes AAA-isms, I had no idea just how much worse it was going to get. I'm starting to get a little tired of how often I repeat a phrase that starts with something like, oh, you know what was missing from the original Final Fantasy VII? And then I exclaim something from Rebirth that's currently happening. Because it really feels like you can't go 5 minutes in this game without running into something that just drags the entire experience down. And I'm not even specifically talking about comparisons to the original game, because I would argue that a majority of this game's content wouldn't be enjoyable in any of its contemporaries, even less so in an adaptation. And again, I don't even know why people clown on Ubisoft Towers so much, when clearly it was fine when Final Fantasy does it, because this game has Ubisoft Towers, and I never heard that as a complaint before I started playing it. I still don't hear it as a complaint, as a matter of fact. The only reason I hear it as a complaint is because I complain about it so much. The only reason I haven't dropped the game so far is because I paid real-life money for it, and if I hadn't, I would have already dropped it by now. It is beyond grounds for dropping, and I certainly won't be spending money on Revelations if I play it at all. But never say never, the game could always get much worse than it is right now, and I end up dropping it anyway. It would finally give me time to start Final Fantasy VIII and get back to playing, you know, the whole series. And now for the weekly topic this week, which is a question, that being, does Japan just make better games? I know it's very ironic given the topic I just finished talking about, but at the end of the day, I did compare it to Ubisoft, which, you know, isn't Japanese. I thought of this on my recent trip to Japan because I visited a lot of sites of, you know, video game stores, and all of my favorites are from Japan. Hell, even just ones I kinda like are from Japan. Of the 70 or so games that make up games that I've given a 9 or above, only about 20-something of them are not from Japan, and I would guess just from eyeballing it that that number would be cut in half if we were cutting out all the indie games. When it comes to AAA, I think the West makes some doo-doo dog shit. For every Halo or Titanfall that I end up falling in love with, there's like 15 billion Call of Duties, or Far Cries, or Fallouts. I don't even think the West should bother with RPGs. The only one I can think of that I've liked off the top of my head is Undertale, and that's pretty explicitly inspired by non-Western RPGs. Then when things like Skyrim are held up as like the pinnacle of the medium when it comes to Western RPGs, it makes me feel like I'm definitely not missing out. I certainly respect Valve, but aside from the Portal games, which I like, nothing they've ever made looks interesting to me. It's such a specific pattern that at some point I have to assume that it's just a me thing, and that there are quite a few Western games that don't really fit my specific tastes. I mean, hell, look at Spider-Man. Everyone in the West fucking loves those games, and I think they're okay. But at the same time, it's not like I have some inherent bias against Western games, because despite the fact that 7 out of my top 10 are Japanese, the other 3 are definitely not. Because Batman Arkham is one of my top 5 games of all time. Terraria is one of my favorite games of all time, period. Aside from Splatoon, which is a third-person shooter, the Japanese have certainly never made a first-person shooter that I like very much. Meanwhile, Halo 3 and Titanfall 2 are 2 of my favorite games of all time. Donkey Kong, the franchise, might be Japanese, but Country Returns, which is one of my top 3 of all time, was developed by an American studio. I say all of this to say, while I can certainly admit if it is just a bias on my part against Western games, at the same time, I clearly enjoy plenty of Western games, so is it really a bias, or are there just a lot of Western games that suck dick? Or alternatively, do the Japanese just make better games overall? Maybe one day when I've made it through more of my backlog, I'll have a better answer to that question, but for now, let me know what you think in the comments below. And otherwise, that's it. Get out of here.